In this video, I'll demonstrate implementing the persistent communications pattern for AJAX. Using the ASP.NET extensions for AJAX, there are two different ways, or two different general ways that you can implement the persistent communications pattern for AJAX. One is ways that use the update panel, others are ways that don't use the update panel. In this video, I'll demonstrate ways that use the update panel, and then in the next How Do I video, I'll demonstrate methods that do not use the update panel. The basic problem that we're trying to solve here is that the World Wide Web, and therefore web applications, run on top of the HTTP protocol, which is innately stateless. There's no built-in state mechanism for HTTP. So what that means is that a request gets sent from a client, in most cases a browser, to the server, and the browser doesn't know if the server's even there because there's no constant communication. The server does whatever it's asked to do and then sends a request back to the browser, but when the server sends that request back, it doesn't know if the client that made that request is still there. And there's no sort of bidirectional ongoing dialogue. So since the birth of the World Wide Web, we've been building technologies and using tricks to add state management to that innately stateless protocol. Now, we're moving our standard web applications from a user interaction model in which most user interactions result in a navigation to the next page in the workflow to a model where the page becomes more of an application container and then areas in the screen get updated based on user interactions. But sometimes we don't want to wait for a specific user interaction to update areas of the page, and that's where this persistent communication pattern comes in. So the simplest way to do persistent communication is based on a simple time interval. So let's do that first using the update panel. Remember, I'm showing the update panel versions in this video, and then in the next How Do I video, I'll show ones that don't use the update panel but use service methods instead. So let's create a new AJAX enable website. I'm going to rename this because we're actually going to add a couple of pages to this application. So let's call this one update panel. And I'll add timer, update panel timer, because this one's actually going to use the timer control as well as the update panel. And this is the simplest implementation of this pattern. So let's go ahead, open up the ASPX page, go over into design mode, and I'm going to grab an AJAX update panel from my AJAX extensions tool tab. Then I'm going to go up and grab a label control. So what we're building here is basically the sort of quintessential update panel demo, where we just update the text property of the label control with the current date and time, and I'm going to do that in the page load event. Again, you can update the update panel in any event handler that's part of the postback collection for that update panel. So label text. It's now, let's put that in quotes. Okay. Back over into design mode. I'm going to stretch that out a little bit to make sure it all fits. Next, I'm going to hop down, back down to my AJAX extensions toolbox tab again and grab a timer control. And the default is 60 seconds, so for the purpose of this demo, I'm going to change the update interval to be 3 seconds. Hop over into source mode here, and you'll notice that now we have an interval of 3000, which is 3 seconds. And then all I need to do is wire up a trigger. So we'll wire up an async postback trigger to the timer. Timer 1 control, and we want to update the update panel whenever the tick event fires, and the tick event is fired at whatever interval we've specified here. Right? So very simple. And again, this is the most straightforward, simplest way to implement the persistent communications pattern. Right? It's not necessarily the most optimal, but it's certainly the easiest to program. So now, as we sit here and watch, the page will automatically update every 3 seconds. So 52, 55, 58. right? And so what that means is we've now implemented the persistent communications pattern so that the browser is constantly in communication with the server. Now, obviously there are some possible issues here. If the server stops responding at some point, we haven't implemented any sort of error handling mechanism, and it might also be that we want to implement some logic behind, so we don't want to just automatically update the update panel every 3 seconds. Maybe we want to trigger some logic behind that. So to do that, let's add another page to our web application, and we'll demonstrate a JavaScript-driven version of the persistent update panel, of the persistent communications pattern using the update panel. So to do that, let's call this one update panel JavaScript. Of course, we'll use code behind. Because this is a new page, I'm going to need a script manager, and then an update panel. And for this update panel, I want to wire up an event handler for the onload event. And here, this is where we can populate the labels. So we'll say and in order to do that, of course, I'll actually have to put a label in the update panel. There we go. Now we can do that. Okay. So in our code behind, we're saying when the update panel loads, specify the new date and time. So now we can specifically trigger the update panel update, and we're going to do that through JavaScript. So let's hop into source mode. Luckily, JavaScript has constructs that make it reasonably easy to do this. I'm going to clean up this a little bit. I prefer the shorthand version of implementing the script manager. So here in our header section, let's add some JavaScript. So we'll say script language equals JavaScript. And the first thing that we're going to need to do is to get a reference to the page request manager. So let's say var prm sys.webforms dot page request manager dot get instance. And now that I have the reference to the page request manager, let's create a function to update the update panel. So let's say function update, and then with our page request manager, we'll call do postback. Whoops. And we need to pass in our update panel. And then reset the timeout, which we haven't set initially yet, but set timeout. So this is sort of a recursive call here. Set timeout. And we're going to pass in a reference to ourselves, meaning this, we're going to pass in a reference to the function that this call is in by name, and then set the interval, and we'll set the interval equal to 3 seconds. And then the last thing that we need to do is initialize the timeout so that things start when the page loads. Now, notice that in the update JavaScript function here, I'm just automatically doing the postback. But what this lets you do is do conditional postbacks, right? So here you can, again, you're only constrained here by your own imagination, but rather than just using the timer control and saying, hey, every X seconds automatically update, here we can add some conditional logic to determine whether or not we want to update every X number of seconds, in this case every 3 seconds. Just need to pass this in as a string. Now let's go ahead and try it. So 29, 32, 35. Notice updating every 3 seconds. No full page postback, no full page refresh, but done in JavaScript, where we can use conditional logic to determine whether or not we want to update, or how much we want to update, or what have you, or we want to update multiple update panels, for example, in the same string of logic. So it's that easy to implement the persistent communications pattern with Microsoft's AJAX stack using the update panel. In the next How Do I video, I'll demonstrate implementing this pattern using service method calls and not using the update panel, which, although a little bit more difficult to program, offers certain performance improvements as well as certain architectural advantages.